It's been almost 7 months now since the death of a young woman in police custody sparked the biggest anti-regime protests in Iran in decades. Mass protests might have become less common since then, but resistance has taken different forms. DW met a young Iranian woman whose refusal to stop dancing led her into exile.
Baby, calm down, calm down. Yo, this your body, put in my heart for lockdown, for lockdown, for lockdown.
Dancing, she says, is the only thing that really makes her soul happy. Here in Istanbul, Sabah Bagheri is free to dance wherever she wants. And yet, she would rather be home in Iran.
Baby, come give me your lo, 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 wo, 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 wo. You got me like wo, wo, wo.
There, she only danced in her own room and posted videos of it on Instagram. But even that wasn't safe, because in Iran, women are not allowed to dance. And her own family didn't approve.
A family member reported me to the cyber police. He went to the police department and asked them to stop me and not let me do these things anymore. They interrogated me for about 5 or 6 hours and then took me to a room to record a forced confession. They gave me a chador, attached a microphone and set the camera on my face so that I could express my regret for what I did and for dancing.
But Sabah did not regret dancing and fled to Turkey in 2020. From here, she and her friends follow what's happening in their home country, where women have turned dancing into a weapon against the Islamic Republic. This video from Tehran's Ekbatan neighborhood went viral. When the women in it were arrested, others followed suit, showing their disdain for the country's strict Islamic rules and the regime that enforces them.
For lockdown, for lockdown.
Sabah is proud of them.
Maybe people in the rest of the world say, what kind of resistance is that? But when you're punished somewhere for dancing, doing that is a kind of resistance.
From Istanbul, Sabah is not able to join in at the moment, since she's already on the regime's radar. Returning to Iran would be too dangerous. And so instead, she works in a factory 6 days a week to get by. But the news coming from her home country gives her hope.
This resistance of men and women who don't want to live under the burden of oppression shows the future of Iran. Young people there are very fond of art, of dancing, singing, of music and so on. And in a free Iran, all of them can be happy and do what they like.
When that happens, Sabah wants to return to her hometown Mashhad and see her loved ones again. Even the family member who betrayed her to the police. She's willing to reconcile and forgive as long as she and all other Iranians are free.
For more, I'm joined now in the studio by Teresa Tropper. She's an Iran expert here at DW. So Sabah, whom we met in that report, she is now safely in Turkey, but there are many women who continue dancing in Iran. How dangerous is it for them?
Very dangerous. I mean, the Islamic Republic has shown over decades, and especially in the last couple of months, what it's willing to do to make sure that Iranians stick to its strict rules. You know, Gina Mahsa Amini died in police custody just because she didn't entirely stick to the strict dress code and got arrested because of that. Then the 2 journalists who uncovered her story are still in prison just for reporting. And then when many, many people took to the streets to protest against all of that, like hundreds were killed and tens of thousands were arrested just for protesting. And the women we saw in that report in the middle that were dancing in Tehran are also arrested now. And so it's easy to become a political prisoner in Iran. And from reports, we know what that means. Systematic torture and sexual assault are very common in these prisons. So the risk these women are taking is quite enormous.
What does it say, Teresa, about Iranian society when someone gets reported to the police by their own family?
Well, it tells you that this society is split in those people who are against the Islamic Republic and want its downfall. And polls show us that this is by far the majority. But people who still support the regime, I mean, there are people who still believe that the people in power should stay in power. Partly maybe because they think that religion and government should be inseparable. And some also think that the Islamic Republic is still the only way how Iran can stand its ground against so-called enemies like the US or Israel. And that's also why we're seeing things like a couple of days ago when that man was throwing a yogurt onto women in a shop just because they weren't fully veiled. But there are many people who have other reasons as well to support the Islamic Republic, and that's personal profit. You know, Iran's bad economy, most people are suffering from that, from high inflation, from high unemployment. But all of that is mostly, or at least in parts, caused by widespread corruption. So there are a lot of people who got very rich during the Islamic Republic, and that's why they wanted to stay in place.
What about the future of young women like Saba? Would she, at some point, do you think, have a chance to go back to Iran?
Well, she herself certainly hopes so. And at the moment, many, many Iranians in exile share that hope and also that opinion. That's because the current wave of protests we're seeing is the biggest one since the foundation of the Islamic Republic in 1979. And while mass protests have become less common, we're still seeing them in the East, where people are still taking to the streets every Friday, in Kurdistan, where that movement started. And people's anger hasn't faded away. And in fact, they even have more reasons to be angry. So yesterday we saw protests in Tehran in front of the house of a young man who was killed by the regime's forces. So that's still going on. And many Iranians believe this regime does not have a future.
Teresa, thank you very much. That was Teresa Tropper from DW.